In 2017, one of the most recognizable brands on the planet shut its doors forever. 800 stores, 33,000 employees gone. And here's the thing. It wasn't Amazon that killed Toys R Us. It wasn't bad products. It wasn't even bad management. It was one single decision made 15 years earlier that made bankruptcy completely inevitable. This is the real story of how Toys R Us destroyed itself. If you grew up in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, you know exactly what walking into a Toys R Us felt like. The smell of fresh plastic, aisles that seemed to go on forever, that iconic giraffe on the sign. For millions of kids, it wasn't just a store, it was a destination. So how does a company that beloved with that much brand power end up completely bankrupt? The answer will genuinely shock you. Toys R Us was founded in 1948 by a man named Charles Lazarus in Washington, D.C. He started with a simple idea, a store dedicated entirely to baby furniture. But he quickly noticed something. Parents kept coming back asking for toys. So he pivoted. By the 1950s, the store was pure toys, and the concept exploded. At a time when toys were sold as a small section inside department stores, Lazarus created an entire world dedicated to them. It was a radical idea, and it worked. By the 1980s, Toys R Us was the dominant toy retailer in America. They were so powerful that toy manufacturers basically had to work with them or lose access to millions of customers. Mattel, Hasbro, Lego, they all needed Toys R Us more than Toys R Us needed them. At its peak, the company was pulling in $11 billion a year in revenue and operating in 30 countries. Geoffrey the Giraffe was one of the most recognized brand mascots in the world. Everything was perfect until the year 2000. In the early 2000s, the internet was changing everything. E-commerce was still new, but it was growing fast. Toys R Us knew they needed an online presence, so they launched a website to sell toys online. And it actually worked, almost too well. The site was so popular during the 2000 holiday season that Toys R Us couldn't keep up with orders. They ran out of inventory. Thousands of kids woke up on Christmas morning with no gifts because the orders never shipped. It was a disaster. The Federal Trade Commerce fined them for it. So Toys R Us made a decision. Instead of building out their own e-commerce operation, they would outsource it. They signed a deal with a small but growing company called Amazon to be the exclusive toy seller on their platform. Toys R Us would handle the products, Amazon would handle the logistics. It seemed smart at the time, but here's what happened next. Amazon quickly started letting other toy sellers into their platform anyway, breaking the exclusivity deal. Toys R Us sued and eventually won in 2006, getting out of the contract. But the damage was done. They had wasted 6 critical years not building their own e-commerce infrastructure, while Amazon had spent the same 6 years becoming the most powerful retailer on the internet. By the time Toys R Us tried to build their own online store, it was too late. Amazon was untouchable. But the Amazon deal wasn't even the killing blow. That came in 2005. Private equity firms KKR, Vornado, and Bain Capital bought Toys R Us at a leveraged buyout for $6.6 billion. If you don't know what a leveraged buyout is, basically the buyer puts up a small amount of their own money and borrow the rest. Then they load that debt onto the company they just bought. Toys R Us suddenly had $5 billion in debt sitting in its books. Every year, they had to spend $400 million just on interest payments alone. That's $400 million that could have gone towards renovating stores, building a better website, competing with Amazon and Walmart on price. Instead, it was just gone. Every year, no matter what. Walmart and Target were selling toys at razor-thin margins to get parents into the stores. Amazon was offering free 2-day shipping. And Toys R Us, buried under a mountain of debt, simply couldn't compete. They couldn't lower prices. They couldn't invest in technology. They were stuck. By 2017, Toys R Us was out of options. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, hoping to restructure their debt and keep operating. Suppliers started getting nervous and demanded payment up front. That made cash flow even worse. Then came the holiday season of 2017, their last chance. And it went badly. Not because nobody wanted toys, but because parents, seeing the bankruptcy headlines, went to Amazon and Walmart instead just to be safe. The very news of the bankruptcy accelerated it. In March 2018, Toys R Us announced it was closing every single store in the United States. 800 locations, 33,000 jobs, all of it gone. Charles Lazarus, the founder, died just days after the announcement at age 94. He never got to see if the brand could be saved. So what can we actually learn from this? Well, first, outsourcing your most important capability is almost always a mistake. The moment Toys R Us handed their e-commerce future to Amazon, they handed over their future, period. Second, debt is a silent killer. Toys R Us wasn't losing money because people stopped buying toys. Kids still wanted toys. Parents still spent billions on them. The company collapsed almost entirely because of a financial structure that made it impossible to compete. A healthy company was made terminally ill by one buyout deal. And third, brand loyalty is not enough. Toys R Us had one of the strongest emotional connections with customers of any retailer on the earth. People loved that store, but love doesn't pay interest on $5 billion of debt. Love doesn't build a faster website. At the end of the day, business fundamentals always win. Toys R Us didn't die because the world stopped wanting toys. The global toy market is worth over $100 billion today. It died because a series of decisions that compounded over 15 years until there was no way out. And honestly, it didn't have to end that way. If this video gave you a new way of looking at how business really works, hit subscribe. I break down stories like this every week. And if you want to see another collapse story, I'll have the next one up the same time next week. See you guys there.